Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm reviewing episode 9 of the first season of Binbogami Ga. Here we see a little bit of a change in the format of this series. It's basically, at least for this episode, split into more or less two different stories that each covering about 15 minutes approximately. We got to see a little bit of that last episode, but here it's much more formalized. And honestly, I have some mixed feelings about this. Now, I like that they're not stretching the stories out too much. Believe you me, I've gotten seriously burned out on really good series who might possibly be named Naruto and Bleach by the amount of padding that happens sometimes, especially with Bleach. Here, so I do appreciate the fact that they aren't afraid to just take a chapter of the manga and run with it, and if it's a story that can be told in 15 minutes, then that's what they do. On the other hand, I'm just kind of worried that they're going to keep doing this really more just to get through as much of the manga as they can, rather than giving us something, a real finish, something that they can really build towards. Now, I might be wrong on that, but I've been hearing that this is only going to be a 13-episode season, and who knows if it's going to be back next season. I've certainly been hearing that the series is being very well received, so I'm certainly hoping for a season 2, because some new chapters of the manga were just translated by the fans, of course. The manga has not officially been licensed for an English release yet. Something to hope for, and it really looks like they're really gearing up for a pretty serious shift in the tone of the series, and I'm okay with that, because as I said, one of the complaints that, or not really a complaint, but one of the worries that I have about this series is it turning into a big Tom and Jerry cartoon between Momiji and Ichiko. And if what I've seen in the newest translations and what I've heard is going to be a little bit, I have heard a little bit about what happens later on in the series and discussing the show and the series with other fans. I think it's starting to head in a really interesting direction. And if the show does come back for a second season, I think that we would start to get into that, and I think it would be some really cool stuff. But let's focus on the here and now. And part of the problem with doing these, boy, I can't talk. Part of the problem with doing these sort of 15-minute episodes is there's really not a lot of room for any real character development. And, talking about character development is kind of what we do around here. But, you make do with what you have, right? So let's talk a little bit about what we do have here. So let's start off with, of course, the obligatory references to other anime shows. I definitely got a big kick out of Momiji cosplaying as post-time skip Luffy. I think that was needed. I really do enjoy the way the characters from One Piece have changed after the time skip, so I did like seeing a nod to that. And the ridiculously photogenic / handsome guy that was at the tennis match, he's a big reference to the character of, I kid you not, this is their name, Lady Oscar, from the very classic manga series, which I do believe did get an anime adaptation years and years ago, called The Rose of Versailles, a very, very venerable shoujo series. And this just kind of confirms more to me that the original creator of the show, whose name I can't recall off the top of my head, is very much a fan of old school anime and manga. So I did enjoy that. Now, this episode, we got to see some more of Ichiko and Momiji adopting crazy, insanely masculine faces. I didn't recognize it at the time. Another fan had to point this out to me, that this is a reference to the series Grappler Baki. Other than that it's a martial arts series, I really don't know anything about Grappler Baki. I saw the manga one time at a store, sort of looked at it a little bit, and it's just like, wow, these are some of the ugliest characters that I've ever seen in a scene just about anywhere. So I took a pass on that one. Although from people who have read it, they say that if you're into those martial arts series, that it's quite a good one. So other than that, I did spot what I'm pretty sure is a reference to. Uh, in Japan, it was known as Tetsujin 28. In America, it was brought over in the 1960s and rechristened Gigantor. So, or it could possibly be a reference to Getter Robo. I'm not 100% sure. And that's with Momiji dressed as a boy standing on the shoulder of the rather somewhat Egyptian-looking robot from the Eye Catch. Also, I was more than a little amused to hear them use the English name and mention Bigfoot. I've discovered that this is in this neck of the world, East Asia, that this is one of the few sort of legendary creatures from America that people over here are familiar with, and it's just because they've watched a lot of American TV and movies. I've mentioned before that that I'm an English teacher here in South Korea, and I've done also done that job in Japan. And one thing I actually did as part of my Halloween lesson was a lesson on monsters that come from America. So naturally, I talked about Bigfoot, and I threw in guys like the Headless Horseman and Mothman and the Jersey Devil. And in showing it to some of my Korean coworkers, across the board, Bigfoot was the only one that they had ever heard of. So, I'm guessing this would probably hold true in Japan as well. So, just a little observation I thought I'd share with you. One joke from the show that really just confused the heck out of me was when Ichiko looks inside of a rice cooker and Momiji's head is in there. Ichiko says something like, "What are you supposed to be, Darvish?" Well, I had to go and look this up, but apparently in Japan there's a fella by the name of Yu Darvish. He's half Japanese, half Iranian, and he's a baseball player there. Now, what in the world this has to do with a head in a rice cooker is completely beyond me, folks. If you know what's going on there, let me know, because I would really like to understand what that's about. If they were going to go for that, or like throwing some kind of pop culture reference into that situation, I'd have thought maybe not exactly The Godfather, but yes, Seven. Seven would have been a really nice really nice thing to reference there. And if you've not seen Seven, that's a really, really intense but very cool movie. Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, yeah, good stuff there. We do get introduced to a new character, Kuro Yuri, in keeping with the tradition of having the girls in the show have plant-based names. Kuro is, of course, black, and as I'm sure a lot of you folks out there know, Yuri means lily. And, of course, Yuri is also a word generally tending to refer to lesbianism, and if what we've seen of her thought process is any indication, it looks as if Kuro Yuri has a thing for Yamabuki, the 20-foot-tall woman who's her boss. There's a Futurama snoo reference / joke in there, but I can't quite find it, so I'm just going to let you guys make that joke in your own head. In terms of characterization, there's really not, I think, a whole lot to say about Kuro Yuri. She's just sort of there to be, I don't even know if you could call her a one-shot villain. She's more of like a one-shot antagonist. Her presence does sort of reinforce why it is Momiji is getting as much slack as she is to deal with Ichiko. But again, beyond that, she doesn't really have much in the way of terms of characterization. She's just there to kind of be a one-shot character, and that's about it. And she certainly is funny, but I don't really have a whole lot to say about her. What I would like to do is talk about the subtitles that we've been watching for this show. Now, keep in mind that we've not been seeing any translated by, edited by, blah, 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 blah. The usual junk that you see given excessive and at times lavish attention in fan subs. So I'm guessing that these are probably just the translations used by the folks at Funimation, who again have licensed this series for release in the English-speaking world. And if that's the case, then I gotta say, I really do hope that they keep Ichiko and Momiji as foul-mouthed in the English version as they are in the subtitles. I am just taking ridiculous amounts of pleasure in just seeing the sheer foul-mouthedness of these two girls, and of course, Kuroyuri gets in on the act in this episode quite spectacularly. I definitely plan to pick this series up on DVD when it gets an official release, and I'm going to be really disappointed if when I get to this episode 1, Kuroyuri is not for some reason speaking in a British accent. I don't know where that came from with the subtitles. Once I started noticing that's what they were doing with her, I started paying more attention to the Japanese, and I didn't notice anything particularly strange about the way she was speaking Japanese. But I left Japan 7 years ago, so my Japanese has definitely gotten a little rusty, so maybe I'm just missing something. But as I was saying, if when this is released in English, if I don't get to watch this episode and get to see her going, "Fuck me!" like she did in this episode, I am really going to be very disappointed. Okay. Oh, yes, one more thing. Even though I said that there's really not too awful much in terms of characterization going on, there was one thing about the first episode that really jumped out at me. And it's when Ranmaru starts talking to Keita, and he agrees to be her partner at tennis. Ranmaru immediately starts just running through this whole elaborate scenario of this being the start of them dating and falling in love and getting married. I actually read a book about psychology a couple of months ago, and it literally did talk about this exact scenario. This is being something that people with esteem issues do when they first meet someone who they like or who may show even just a small amount of interest in them. Now, I don't really think that anybody at any of the writers were sitting around with psychology books, going through that looking for things to use in this show. But I do like that this is something that realistically people do this. And I think is also a little bit hinting at Ranmaru's character that, beyond being a tough martial arts person, she doesn't really have a whole lot going for her. She is generally very awkward socially around people. She's quite clearly never had a boyfriend before, and it looks as if she's not exactly swimming in friends besides Ichiko. So it really isn't surprising that she might have some self-esteem issues. I throw that out there for your consideration. Anyway, folks, that's all I really have to say for this episode. And as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And you can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. So until next time, take care and have a good one.